welcome to Focus. Freedom often causes unbelievable silence. Well, we have with us a couple of individuals that I have a great deal of respect for. I've been meeting with them for some time. We will be talking about a new organization that has started up here in Jefferson City. But before we get into the interview itself, I would like to introduce you to our guest, Ms. Eva Schulte, and she is from Kansas City, Missouri, and she is the Executive Director of Community Creating Opportunity, and Mr. Reverend Jim Hill with Missouri Voices, and that is a statewide organization that was recently formed. And they are here to talk about this new formed organization, Jefferson City Jefferson City Congregation United. Sorry about that. First of all, we want to have you to tell us a little bit more about yourselves. We know that you are associated with these two organizations, but tell us a little bit about yourselves. We'll start with you, Eva.
Okay. Thank you so much for the invitation, WT. I am a diaconal minister in the Lutheran Church, and my call is to be building bridges between the church and the world. And I live that call out through the work of congregation-based community organizing. So I've been in this work with our national network, PICO, which stands for People Improving Communities Through Organizing, for 11 years, and serving in Kansas City for 7. And it's been my privilege to be the executive director of Communities Creating Opportunity over that time. We are a 35-year-old organization. And over the last few years, I've been the organizing consultant to support the new faith-based community organization, Jefferson City Congregations Uniting here.
Okay. Reverend Hill.
I'm from here in Jefferson City, and I'm the executive director for ChurchNet, which is a statewide network of Baptist churches, and I'm a member here at First Baptist Church. But became involved with Eva and with CCO through the forming of the Interreligious Roundtable about 3 years ago that's been meeting here in Jefferson City on a quarterly basis for these past 3 years. And it was really that organization that helped to give birth to Missouri Faith Voices that I'm a part of now.
Okay. Well, thank you all for agreeing to come and share a little bit of information about all three of these organizations, as a matter of fact. But I guess we'll start off by how did the decision come about to establish a faith-based organization here in Jefferson City?
Well, I think it grew out of the Interreligious Roundtable and the work that CCO in Kansas City, Communities Creating Opportunity, has been in existence, I guess, for more than 30 years. And but as their congregations addressed issues that were of concern to the churches in their area and the congregations in their area, they began to identify some issues that were really broader than Kansas City. You know, they were issues that affected congregations all across our state. And they really invited many of the rest of us into a dialogue about some of these issues and formed what is known as the Interreligious Roundtable. It's just a group of religious leaders from across Missouri that have been meeting to talk about common concerns and issues. Been meeting on a quarterly basis here in Jefferson City. We've had some events at the Capitol and where we had opportunities to visit with some of our legislators about concerns that congregations have. But there were many Jefferson City people involved in that process. Obviously, we were fortunate in that the group was meeting here in our community, and we had an opportunity to be a part of that process and learn about CCO and learn about the roundtable. And some of the church leaders and religious leaders here in our own community began to say, you know, we need an organization like CCO. I think somebody asked Eva if we could have a CCO here. And her response was, well, you can't have a CCO here, but you could form your own organization here. And that's really, I think, how the thing came about.
Could you tell us how did Communities Creating Opportunity in Kansas City get started? And why was it necessary?
Great question. So in 1977, Father Norman Rodert, the founder of Communities Creating Opportunity, started to see people in his parish leave in droves. And the reality of that neighborhood at that time was racial transitioning. When he started to figure out more of what was happening, he learned that there were practices of redlining and blockbusting, which means that realtors would come in and buy up properties and have an African American family move next door and in a offensive way try to break barriers between a group of people that could have had positive relationship. So that intentional blockbusting by economic interest happened repeatedly over and over in this community of Blue Hills, where that St. Therese Little Flower Catholic Parish was rooted. And it tore the congregation apart. So he tried to investigate what to do, and as a parish priest knew that it wasn't only enough to preach in his homilies, but it was his mission to try to create a different reality for this church that was being torn apart. So he got his realtor's license, and he started fixing up houses, and the church would help new families come into those houses. But still, some of the economic disinvestment that started with that predatory practice of redlining had its impact on that neighborhood. And they found that the city wrote off any new investment for a certain amount of time. And so when Father Norman Rodert took a sabbatical to Oakland, California, he met Father John Bauman, the founder of our PICO National Network. And it was there he learned of PICO and the work of faith-based organizing across this country. And he brought two community organizers to the Kansas City area specifically to start engaging that neighborhood. He also founded a community development corporation to do the bricks and mortar development that was needed. And hand in hand with the community organizing, they started to create a greater prioritization of investment for that neighborhood, and then started to repair some of the breach that had been created between the white and black communities within Blue Hills. So that was our founding, and to this day we continue to confront predatory lending and the usurious practices in Missouri that are no longer going to be tolerated by people of faith. Mm-hmm. And I can talk more about that. We're leading an initiative petition across this state to cap the rate of predatory lending, specifically payday, car title, and consumer installment lending to 36%. That may sound a lot, but if you take a look at what the average interest rate in Missouri is, currently it's 445%, and it can go all the way up to 1,952%. Mm-hmm. So that means that families that are just trying to make it from paycheck to paycheck, if they take out a payday loan, rather than making it on streamlined income, they start to spiral into a debt they can't get out of. So it's the same kind of predatory practice that CCO confronted in 1977 that we continue to confront today.
Okay. What have been some of the particular successes of CCO in Kansas City that you can speak to, and some of the things that you've had to confront?
Mm-hmm. We have had significant success in keeping people in their homes over the last few years. And at the same time, given the foreclosure crisis, have had to dramatically change our approach to do that. So several years ago, we were successful in leveraging $10 million for home repair to 4 target neighborhoods where we had congregations rooted in those neighborhoods that partnered with the city and with community development corporations to keep seniors who couldn't afford a $12,000 roof repair to have the kind of assistance money they needed to stabilize that neighborhood they had raised their children in. So that was a major victory for our CCO communities across the metro. We now span 20 neighborhoods in Kansas City. And when the foreclosure crisis hit, that home repair wasn't enough. So we started to organize to change policies that can prevent the reality in Missouri that a family that is having a hard time paying their mortgage, if they get a foreclosure letter, the bank can foreclose on them in 38 days without a phone call, without a face-to-face interaction. And so this year, this legislative session, congregations in Kansas City are joining with other congregations across the state to support an automatic mediation legislation that would require, before foreclosure, that a bank or lender sit down with that homeowner to try to modify, because it makes economic sense for all people involved, especially those neighbors and that homeowner, but even the bank, to keep that family in their home.
Knowing that a faith-based organization, any civic organization, cannot do what you just mentioned alone, what is the process, the methodology that you use to get to that success point?
And Jim can speak to some of this too. We believe that power, the ability to act, power is a product of relationships. So we cannot, as you mentioned, do this work without incredible civic partners, other social service partners, and of course the leadership that's coming out of our faith communities and our congregations. So we intentionally start to build those relationships through listening. We listen to the concerns that are coming out of our congregations through one-to-one conversations, through house meetings. And then we also want to hear from our social service agencies. How are you impacted by a budget cut or by increasing crime in the neighborhood that we share? And it's through identifying that common self-interest that we create a collective vision for how each agency can play its part and each community organization can contribute to creating the change that we need.
Both of you being ministers, historically thinking, ministers preach in the church on Sunday morning, they have Bible study and prayer service, but don't really get too involved out front on community issues. How does this work, being a faith-based organization, that will make an organization such as this effective, knowing the traditional mindset of congregations and ministers or priests or whatever?
Well, I think sometimes, all of our churches want to engage the problems that exist in our communities. I guess there may be no place in our communities where where it's easier to feel the pain than in local congregations where they're ministering to their members and others in the community. And so they're working at trying to hear, like Eva said, to listen to the pain in the community, to listen to where there are people struggling, and where there are, one of her listening questions that she often uses in her training events is, what keeps you up at night? Well, we're listening for that kind of pain. We're trying to help congregations. Faith-based community organizing doesn't go into a congregation and say, this is what you need to work on. We go in and try to help a congregation listen to its own community, to its own membership, and identify where the pain is, and where the passion is. And then we help guide them in the process of just learning from the other community organizations and leadership about these issues that are surfaced, so that we identify what the real issues and what are the systems behind the issues. In our own church, we're much better at working at ministering to needs than we are at addressing the systems that create the needs. And so a part of what we're trying to do is not just involve pastors. We obviously want clergy involved, but we want lay leaders involved. We want the congregation involved in both identifying the needs and then designing strategies and actions to address those needs. how do we work to change our community into the kind of community that we believe God wants it to be?
Now there are and have been faith-based groups meeting in Jefferson City for years. Why start a new organization? Why not simply interact with the existing organization and maybe change the focus or add on a few goals of that existing organization? What was the real benefit of starting a new organization?
Sure. We met with 70 different people in one-to-one conversations after there was an interest expressed in forming a faith-based community organization here in Jefferson City. And we asked them that same question. Is there a need for a new entity that will focus on the kind of public concerns Jim just described? And overwhelmingly, we heard yes. There's incredible strength of the Christian Ministerial Alliance and the downtown churches, and yet there was a desire to have a cohesion that can come together to really act into Micah 6:8, right? We're called to walk humbly with our God and to love mercy and to do justice. We have incredible assets and social service institutions that are present in Jefferson City. And we did an inventory of those and met with the directors and the leaders of those organizations and agencies and heard overwhelmingly that the emergency service need, the food need, the housing assistance need is only increasing with smaller and smaller resource. So yes, Jefferson City is incredibly able and successful in doing mercy, fabulous charity work. And we are providing a vehicle, a process through faith-based organizing to also do justice, to do that kind of system change work that so often the busyness of the charity work doesn't allow congregations to step into. So we provide that vehicle and that voice within this community.
I guess that is where you, in your presentation, you make mention of the void, that is an opportunity to step into. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Great, yeah. There is a breach in every one of our communities, and in organizing, we want to identify what that breach is. And in Jefferson City, I just came from a meeting of a beautiful group of people of faith who talked about one woman said her son needed a medical home. And another family last night talked about the lack of transportation within Jefferson City. Other families have talked about the issue of predatory lending and the challenge that that poses to the faith values of congregations and also to the pocketbooks of a brother or a neighbor. And so we provide tools and training and leadership so that people feel equipped and not alone in being able to take one step forward and then another step forward and another, so that we step into the breach of the world as it is and the world as it should be, having one foot firmly grounded in the experience of our people and one foot firmly grounded in saying there can be another way. And so through using this organizing process of listening and doing really sound research and presenting solutions and then acting, taking those steps forward, we create some of those tangible concerns that allow us to step deeper and deeper, so we're eventually able to fill that void between the world as it is and the world as it should be.
Jim, as a minister in Jefferson City, what do you see as the benefit of the various churches and congregations becoming associated with Jefferson City Congregations Uniting?
Well, I actually think there are a number of benefits. I think one of those is getting in touch with our community in a more significant way. I pastored a number of congregations in a variety of settings, but rarely have I felt like that our congregation really was aware of all the needs in our community. And the process that's involved in listening and engaging the community in a broader sense, I think is a really healthy thing for the congregation itself. I think another benefit in this is just the collaboration that happens within the larger community. Just in the last 6 months to a year, as this new organization is being formed, there are levels of relationships across denominational lines, across racial lines, across economic lines that there's a community being built within the faith community that hasn't existed, at least not for me and for many of the other people who expressed the same thing. So there's an opportunity not only to get to know our community in the larger sense, there's an opportunity to get to know the faith community and to find ways to help each other address these needs that we discover in our community. Obviously, in this community, many of the churches are addressing similar needs. Well, how do we find all of us working together, we think, is a better way to find the solutions. Mm-hmm. And it brings a richness to the relationships that we really have been missing. I have built some great friendships with people in other faith traditions and in other congregations that I would not have even known if I had not been involved in this process. And then the power of those congregations working together, saying in a united way, yes, we each have needs that we're working on, but there are some of these needs that we're all working on. And this is a chance for us to leverage the power of all these congregations together to say, let's fix this problem in our community. And so I think there are a lot of great benefits both to the individuals involved, to the congregations involved, and to the larger community as we work on common concerns.
You touched on a question that I have listed here to ask, but we asked you to expound on it a little bit more for us. And the question was basically, what can JCCU, Jefferson City Congregation Uniting, do in the community and in the lives of individuals that a church alone may not do or may not be willing to do individually or alone?
Why don't you go ahead and I'll follow.
Well, we very much are going to be focused on identifying the root causes to the issues that keep our people up at night, right? So Jefferson City Congregations Uniting, through stepping into a campaign of listening that doesn't only include Second Baptist or First Presbyterian or First Baptists, but includes congregations from across the city, is entering into a season of discovery to name as a community, how do we see this world? And I haven't heard that has happened as systematic or intentional yet before. So there's real opportunity in that listening right now. And that was launched 3 weeks ago with 55 people from across Jefferson City coming to a training on how to do house meetings in their congregations and their communities. So that's distinct. And the identification of root cause and the research that we eventually will do, that Jefferson City Congregations Uniting will eventually do, will lead JCCU to choose one or two of those priority issues that they can accomplish systemic change around. Mm-hmm. So not necessarily the creation of a new program that one congregation runs or even a few congregations run together, but the creation of a kind of change. Maybe it's a new innovative way of doing things. Maybe it's a leveraging funding, or perhaps it's a policy change that creates the kind of change that each of the congregations can find ownership over. And we want to make sure to lift up the individual stories that necessitate that change from each of the congregations and how each congregation wants to see that benefit, but work toward that common benefit for this community as a whole.
Anything to add?
Well, in our church, like some others in our community, did a Thanksgiving dinner, a community Thanksgiving dinner, where we provided dinner to anyone that needed it in the community. And I think we fed between 400 and 500 people on Thanksgiving. And we support, like many of the congregations do, the Samaritan Center with food and resources. But what we really want to do is we want to address the systemic problems that create hunger and poverty. We can feed some people from our church, but if we're really going to solve the problem of people being hungry in Jefferson City, we need to do that with each other. We need to do that with other congregations. That's not something one church can handle. But we believe that the congregations in Jefferson City could provide the leadership and the vision for seriously addressing this problem in our community, of poverty and hunger. And that's just one example of the kinds of issues that are bigger than one congregation can address.
You are the president of Missouri Faith Voices, statewide organization. What is the benefit of the statewide organization, as you see it, that will be able to assist local organizations such as JCCU?
Well, as I shared earlier, Missouri Faith Voices really grew out of this interreligious roundtable that was initiated by CCO. And after a few years of meeting on a regular basis with religious leaders from across the state and talking about common concerns and issues, a little over a year ago, there was a decision made by the roundtable, hey, we need to put some structure to this. We need to form it, because the roundtable was kind of a loose confederation of religious leaders without very much structure. And so Missouri Faith Voices just becomes a faith-based community organizing network across Missouri. We really have a number of roles that we think we can provide leadership in. One of those is that we provide a way for these local organizations like JCCU and CCO and others that are in our state to collaborate. We provide an umbrella that allows those groups to work together on some issues that are even larger than those communities, statewide issues. We provide resource and support for groups like JCCU that's just getting formed, and we hope there'll be other communities across the state that will want to form their own groups. But as Missouri Faith Voices, we'd like to be a resource for those groups. We'd like to provide people that can help with training leaders locally and other kinds of resources so that we can support the startup process in some of these communities. And sometimes there are places where these local congregational groups need to come together with one united voice to speak to legislation, to speak to policy issues in our state or in our communities. And this organization provides an avenue for that to take place and some leadership for congregational action on a statewide basis.
We're getting close to our time. Time moves when you're having fun. But the importance of this listening campaign, Eva, could you share a little bit more about the importance of a listening campaign in order to identify the issues in a community?
Yeah, very, very much so. First of all, we want to make sure it is community-wide. And so while we might not have 100 people gathering every week to do the research needed, we know that we need to have 100 people, 500 people, 1,000 people that have given input into what their concern is and what they want to see for Jefferson City. So that listening campaign allows us to deepen the ownership that a community has over any kind of organizing effort. And for example, in the community that I work with in Kansas City in the Northeast, the listening campaign that we did several years ago, we met with over 600 youth and adults in different neighborhoods of the Northeast KCMO, and heard repeatedly that they wanted to see greater activities for youth, better educational achievement, and most importantly, increased safety. And so through all of those different one-to-one conversations and surveys and group meetings, they started to come up with what was eventually called the YES campaign. Stood for youth activities, Y, educational achievement, E, and safety. And that campaign has guided them for 5 years now. To date, they've won 10 new soccer fields in parks that were previously nearly abandoned. And there's a league of 700 youth that are playing soccer for free between 4 and 18. And a lot of these youth were at-risk youth that didn't have alternatives after school. And then with safety, they've built new community relationships with the police and between the Hispanic community, between the Caucasian community, and the police are actually meeting in weekly conversation circles with these community groups. They just had 500 people come out to put forward a community safety plan that involves more foot patrol officers. So that listening campaign, we didn't have clarity on what the solutions would be when we started, but we did the kind of base building that was needed to bring a whole community together into having ownership to say, yes, we can be about the solutions that we've achieved through this work.
Well, I want to thank you all for taking the time to come and share a little bit about Jefferson City Congregation Uniting and Missouri Faith Voices. There is a tremendous opportunity for the Jefferson City community to get involved with Jefferson City Congregation Uniting. These two individuals were very instrumental and twisted my arm. I am the president of the Jefferson City Congregation Uniting. If you're interested in getting involved, please feel free to contact myself, or you can contact Reverend Hill. He is also here locally. So please, your congregations, you as an individual, please take time to consider getting involved with us. We can make a difference here in Jefferson City. We'll see you next time. God bless.